Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Lemesachtas Bava Daf Yud Gimel. We're going to begin on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, fourth line from the top by the two dots. Gufa. Getting back to something that we said before, the pasuk tells us, "Umoal moal ba'Hashem," a person who commits a trespass, a treachery against Hashem. That's a Rabbi's Kadashim Kalam. Shehem Amoyin Nodiv Rabbi Yossi Galili. So we saw in the previous daf that Rabbi Yossi Galili is of the opinion that if a person uses that which is Kadshim Kalam, for example, a carbon shlomim, bechor, so in that situation, because it's moment bailim, because it's considered to be the owner of the person, right? He's the person who actually has the carbon. So because of that, we say that the din of Mo'al Ba'Hashem, which is regarding the dinim of Shavuos HaPikadon, also applies to him. So if, let's say a person had as a safekeeping your carbon shlomim, and then you deny that you have it, and then you end up swearing to that effect, but then admit that you were lying, so in fact you would have to pay Karen Chaimish and Asham. Now, even though the truth is, when it comes to Kachi Shemayim, we don't make such a shvua, as is discussed in Bava Metzia, nonetheless, according to Rabbi Yossi Galili, you do so on Kachim Kalam because it's considered to be your money, and therefore we apply the pasuk of V'chichesh Ba'misoi, that it's considered to be like not a Kachim thing. Now, even though, again, obviously, a carbon shlomim is certainly of great sanctity, but it's not on the same level as, for example, an oila, a chatas, an asham. It's kadashim kalam, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi Galili, the great chiddush is that you're going to be chayav shvuos b'kadlin, and within regard to that, there's also going to be a din nizik. There's also going to be nizikin, even though we say it's shorei lo shorshel hektish, but that will not exclude a shore of Kadashim Kalam, and also you can be Mekadosh and Ishuah according to him, because it's yours. Now, what exactly does that mean? To include a shlomim, is Kadashim Kalam. So Abi Yossi ben Dustoy Omer Lo Omer Ben Azai, when Ben Azai said this statement, is El B'Bechor Bovad. It's only referring to a Bechor. So he meant doesn't say before he says shlomim. Obviously, we understand this sugya. Omar ben Azir Rabos says shlomim yutimai. So what does that exclude? The fact that he says that when it comes to shlomim, so what is that coming to exclude? Now shlomim, Rashi says here, requires smicha, that a person needs to press down on the carbon before the shchita. It also, there's nesachim. There's the libations that accompany the carbon. Minchas nesachim, shloishas and laparshas and la'oil, b'yisur nekeves, etc. It's brought down b'sechtas menachis. So, what exactly does this come to exclude? Ilim mimuti b'chor. Maybe it's come to say not a b'chor. No hashta. No mashlam shetun smicha nesachim tenuvas chas v'shaik. Amrit mom and balam hu. So when it comes to shlomim, it has so many different things in which take upon itself a high level of sanctity. As we just said, what some of them are: smicha, nesachim, also the waving of the chaz v'shoik, of these various sacrificial parts. So if in that situation he says that it's considered still like yours, so b'chor my boy. Bechor, there's nothing to talk about. So Rashi says, first of all, we're talking about Bechor b'chutz la'aretz, right out of the gate. It's not a Bechor in Eretz Yisrael. Kivan delav hakarabakoi. You can obviously have naturally a firstborn animal, but it's not going to be brought as a carbon. Lozachalim shulchan gavoya, dolchazil gavoya. That Bechor is not fit ligvoya because it was in chutz la'aretz. So certainly a bechor from chutz la'aretz, there should be no question. The din is that it's considered to, you should be chayiv shilos b'kalan. El Omer Rabbi Yochanan Miyuti Meiser. It's coming to exclude Meiser. Rashi helps me out a little bit and says Meiser behema. So, what do we see from here? We see that Meiser behema is not mammon balim. So, and the idea, as we're going to see, is because you can't sell it. We're going to see in a second. Mashin came by a bechor. How do we see this by Meiser behema? That's not considered to be mammon balim. But Meiser, so it's like this. Kedesanya. Bebechor nemer lo sifta. When it comes to bechor, referring to the bechor which is a tam, doesn't have a blemish, it says lo sifta. You're not allowed to redeem it in its current state. V'nimkar, but it could be sold. It could even be sold as a tam, chai, balmum, chai v'shochet. So we're lenient when it comes to bechor that it can be sold. But Meiser, Mashen came when it comes to Meiser Behema, never Lui Ga'el. So it cannot be redeemed. So again, we see from here that when it comes to the din of not being able to sell, we're more chomer, or more strict when it comes, we're more machmer when it comes to the din of Meiser Behema. So if we're more machmer when it comes to the din of Meiser Behema, so therefore it's because it has a higher level of sanctity, and therefore that's what he's coming to exclude. That it's not considered, Meiser Behema is not considered to be mammon balim. Okay. That's one interpretation. Ravina Masli La Seifa. He went on the latter part. Abi Yosi ben Dusto Yamer Loi Oimer ben Azai El Bechor Bovad. He only said a statement by Bechor. Now, limutimai, what is that coming to exclude? Elim limuti shlomim, that only a bechor is considered to be mammon balim, but not a shlomim, hashta. Uma bechor shekadosh mirachem. When it comes to bechor, it already takes upon itself the kedusha mirachem, even before it's born. Memoinahu, we still say it's your money. So shlomim, my boy, shlomim, which is born as chulin, and then only later on in its life you designate it as a carbon, so certainly should be mammon balim, because there was a moment in its life in which it was really yours completely, because it was chulin, and you decide to be makdashit and be makravin eventually as a carbon shlomim. Okay, great, that's a beautiful thing that you did, but that certainly should be considered to be mammon balim. So Rabbi Yochanan Muti Meiser, it's coming to again exclude Meiser the sign by Bechor nemer lo siftem nimchar tam chai ubalmum chai b'shachar, but Meiser nemer lo yigol ve'enu nimchar lo chai lo shachar lo tam lo balmum. So we say the same thing. There are machalik between Meiser Behema that you cannot be sold, as opposed to Meiser Behema cannot be sold, as opposed to Bechor which could. 1 second. How about Bechor bilvad kaimer? He says only Bechor bilvad, so it must be specific. Kasha. It's a good question. But again, based on our understanding, it cannot just be referring to a Bechor. It must be also coming to say other things could be mammon balim, including shlomim. Okay. Rav Omer my nesachim she'en behen me'ila nechasim she'en behen din me'ila. What does it mean? Nechasim she'en behen mila, which is going on the mila back in our Mishnah. So he says, we originally made a diak to say, anything which is no mila, which maybe we're referring to kadashim kalim, which has kedusha but there's no din meila. Nonetheless, there's still a chiyuv for damages, and therefore we established our Mishnah like Rabbi Yosef Galili. Well, maybe that's not the proper diak. Maybe it just means she'en behen meila. What does it mean she'en behen meila? Nechasim she'en behen din meila. There's no kedusha at all, just like, and therefore it's not just like Rabbi Yosef Galili. So therefore we can just say poshut umayninhu dehedjit. So it's just referring to a chulin. So listening to the hedjit kash. Okay, they could have maybe have used a different language so as not to have confused us. But it doesn't have to force us to have to say, like we said before. It just means when it comes to all karbanos, even the kadashim kalim, there's no chiyuv nezikin. How, and maybe we don't hold like this shitas yachid of Rabbi Yossi Galili, and we're just going to say more of a blanket statement. Rabbi Abba. So he says like this: Shlomim sheziku gaiva mivsaran ve'ena gaiva me'emerehen. So, if you have a ox, which was a shlomim. Now, this is referring to a tam. It does not have a blemish, and it did damage. So you can collect from literally its basar, but not from its sacrificial parts, not from the emerehen. So let's try to understand what this is referring to. If there's a Rashi here. Okay, let's just continue. So, Pshita, Imarayin, Ligavoya, Salki, why would you think you can collect from the Imarayin? They go to it's part of a carbon that's put on the Mizbeach. Well, Sricha, Ligavoya, Mivsara, Keneged Imarayin. It just means maybe you should collect Keneged Imarayin. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you're going to take I'm sorry, I'm not putting these on the Mizbeach because they belong to me because of damages. No, maybe it means its value. So whatever the Emirayim would cost, you'll be able to collect that amount. So leave it on. If this is according to the Shita of the Rabbanon, says Rashi, immediately before we go another word, look at this Rashi. I'm not sure how we're supposed to know this without seeing this Rashi first. So we're going to see this Rashi first. Says Rashi first, like medium-sized line, quoting in the Perek Shur Shenegel Sapara, I guess because it's coming up. Gabi Shur shedochaf es chaveroi labor. An ox that pushed its friend, in other words, another ox, into a pit. So an ox pushed another ox into a pit. Yamrinan batam bal ashor mishal mervio bal habor potter. Now, on some level, the shore is the one that did the damage. It didn't actually hurt the animal, but since it pushed it into a pit, it caused the animal to fall into that pit. And because it fell into the pit, that animal is damaged. So the din is, as Rashi says, quoting more later on, that the Baal Hashor, Mishal Mervia, the owner of that ox that pushed the other ox, has to pay a quarter. Ubal Habor Potter, and the owner of the pit is Potter. He piloi, because he caused it to fall. So it wasn't the owner of the pit that really is at fault over here. It was really the owner of the ox. Because if you would have watched your ox, this would never have happened. Now, why a quarter? It's because we're talking about a tam. We're not talking, I was talking about a tam versus a balmum. Here we're talking about versus a muad. Okay, that's what I meant to say. So, a tam only pays, when it comes to negicha, you only pay chatzi nezek. But since there's partners in this potential damage, we split the half nezek in half, and therefore the owner of the ox has to pay a quarter, but they say that the owner of the pit doesn't have to pay the other quarter. Uva muad, says Rashi, balashur misham chatzi, ubalabor potter. Again, according to him, according to the Shita, the balabor is completely potter. And if it's a muad, again, we split it, and we say, well, there's some responsibility of the ox, and there was damage from the ox, if you will, there's damage because of the pit. So we split the potential damages, but the balabor is always potter. So if it's a tam, again, the Baal Hashor pays a quarter. Balabor pays nothing. If it's a muad, the Baal Hashor pays chatzi nezek, and the balabor pays nothing. This is the Rabbanan Shita. Alma, says Rashi, Ki leika la shalume mibal hashor loy mishalom bal habor. In a situation where for whatever situation where the Baal Shor doesn't have to pay, then certainly the Baal Habor does not have to pay. We see that the responsibility is more on the Baal Hashor than the Baal Habor. Even though if you look at the pit, the animal is in the pit, but nonetheless the Baal Habor is still potter. We don't say that you have to collect part or the other half and somehow reimburse them, etc. So basically what we're going to say, let's go back to the Gemara. This case in which we're saying the Havamin is maybe you would think that you have to be Goiva, that you would have to pay its value. So according to Rabbanan, then certainly you wouldn't have to do that. It's no chiddush. You wouldn't even need to tell me. Obviously you wouldn't. Ili, but the Rabbanan pshita, says Rash, says the Gemara now. Amri, they said, ki leikel ashlumi mihai, lumishtalmi mihai. If you don't collect from the Baal Ashur, you don't have to collect from the Baal Bor. So also over here, if you're not going to collect from the Imarahan, you don't have to collect keneged. Certainly, there'd be no reason to think that. Now the Eli ibn Rav Nosson. Let's go slow. Rav Nosson, go back to that Gemara, which we need in Rashi, who says the following. And it comes to this case of an ox that pushes another ox into a pit. Says Rashi, interestingly enough, he says that the owner of the ox pays a quarter, and the Baal Bor has to pay the rest. Of a mu'id, and the reason is because Bor, you always pay full damages right away. So the Baal Ashur only has to pay half of what he would be responsible for, because he's half of the guilty party, if you will. So he only pays a quarter. And then the Baal Bor pays everything else. And mu'id, Baal Bor Mishal Mechsa, Baal Bor Mechsa. If it's a shor mu'id, in which it would be Nezek Shalim for the shore, so he only pays half, and the other one pays half. So here it's very interesting. According to Rav Nosson, he holds that the Baal Bor is responsible to pay. According to Rabbanan, the Baal Bor pays nothing, never pays. Says Rashi, why would we say that you don't collect the other parts? So this animal did damage. The hedget of the animal, it's a hybrid. It's partially holy and partially, some of it's not holy. In the animal, the Emerahim are holy, and then the rest of the animal is just a regular animal. But they both together did damage. So according to Rav Nosson, he would hold that you should have to pay, because just like the Baal Shor and Baal Bor are two responsible parties in some regard, and therefore they're both chayiv in something, so too when it comes to here, you should have to collect Keneged Imarayan. So let's see this. So if you hold like the Rabbanon, it's obvious that you shouldn't have to collect Keneged Imarayan. So why would you even have to tell us? There's not even a chiddush. And according to Rav Nosson, why would you say you don't collect? You should collect Keneged Imarayan. So Gemara says like this: Iboy same Rav Nosson, Iboy same Rabbanon. Iboy same Rabbanon. So how could it be like the Rabbanon? The Rabbanon say the Baal Bor is completely potter. That was Hanimili betray Gufe. That's because we're dealing with two different bodies, literally two damagers. Says Rashi, Kagon Shor Bor. We don't have to say Kagon. This is the case, right? Shor Ubor. So in that case, they'll say, listen, the ox pushed it. The Baal Bor didn't do anything. So therefore he's Patu Gamri. If we're dealing with one ox, we're talking about an ox, that the ox contains basar and it contains sacrificial parts, you would maybe think, Matzi Armale, Mikol Heichad Be'inan Mishtal Mena. In whichever way I can collect, I should collect. So if we're dealing with And this is the reason why it has to be a tam, because if it was a mu'id, then we're mishal min haliyah, even above and beyond the value of the animal. So we're talking about a tam in which you only collect megufo. But when you only collect megufo, you're not including the emerehen. Okay. So that's answer number one. Iboy Seimo Rab Nasan. Hasam hu diar milei balasho balabor. The ox, owner of the ox can say, Ana tori bebirach ashkachte. My ox in your pit, I found. In other words, the person who has the damaged ox can say, I see you obviously had an open pit. It shouldn't have been that way. And therefore, my delasli lashlimi mihayach mishtal minoch. Whatever I can't collect from the Baal HaShor, I expect you to pay the difference. Because after all, look inside your pit. There's an ox in there. It's mine. So therefore, you should at least be held partially responsible. So we continue to give him the bays. Omar Basar Azik Umarehin Lo Azik. Can you possibly say the part of the animal damaged and not the rest? Says Rashi. Hilkach Shava Chatzi Hamorim Yasid. Therefore, you lose out on the half of the on the sacrificial parts. Lashon Acher in Rashi, Lo Tzricha Ligvois Misarin Keneged Marehen, Devane Goyvim Misarin Keneged Marehen. So very interesting second shot in Rashi. He says, Taki, you're right. You are right. Maybe you should collect according to him. Keneged Marehen. Okay, I and the rest of the Rashi. Okay. Let's look at question 3. Let's go to the 2 dots. Amarava. Taida shezika. So you have a carbon taida, which is also kadashim kalim, it did damage. Goyvim mivsara, you can collect keneged its basar. Then a goyvim milachma. So we know that in addition to a carbon taida, it's accompanied by 40 breads, some chametz, some matzah. We're not allowed to collect from those. So lechem shita. How would you think the bread didn't do any damage? Seifetz rechlei nizik oichel basar u'mischaper maybe lechem. That if the nizik eats the meat, the mischaper should bring the lechem. So hanami pshita. So what is that coming to tell you? Says Rashi. Nizik oichel basar lacha karavas emurein. After you already mockery of the sacrificial parts, the nizik ate the meat. So in that situation, the din is the mischaper brings the bread. So hanami pshita manatemek yivan lechem tachsher nezevachu. Since the lechem again is some connection to the carbon, malay he should say at ach basar. You ate the meat. The anna icy lechem, and I should bring the bread. No, you should. You the nizik. You should bring it. Kamashmuan the lechem chiv de balam who the lechem is a chiv de bal, and therefore he's the one who brings it. Okay. And now let's look at question 3. Shlomim sheheziku. Then govim emerehim kasha hay karabanan the amriki leko shemi mahai lumishtalmi mahai pshita. Ve'i karam nasan tishtalim mahai amayin mishtalim and a govim emerehim. So it could be like the rabbanon. You can say one is trey gufe, and therefore that's why you don't collect. The balabor is not to pay, but over here it's one body. So therefore you maybe would think that you do have to collect keneged emerehin, or like Rab Nasan. Over there, the nizik can say, I found my oxes inside your pit, therefore you should have to pay whatever is missing. Over here, can he say that the emerehin lu azik, which again, according to that reading, it sounds a little bit like the second lashon in Rashi. Okay. Right. Let's see if we have a question over here. TA, not yet. Okay, question TB2. We just did. Toidish Zika, Toido, which did damage. Goiva mivsara, you can collect from its meat. Ve'enu goiva malachmo, not from its bread. Pshita v'hari lechem lo hizik, the bread didn't do damage. Ma'odatem, that's what I wrote. Shizel l'tzarch kapara. V'hitzrich shnehem mibal, shehem srichim zed zed, ve'hem ha'akvin zed zed, v'komakim goiva mivsara v'loi malachma. Okay, I'm not sure if I had a clue what I was writing there, because it's a little bit, it's a shtickle hard. So let's spend a second going through this sugi again, so that I don't make that mistake twice. So again, the chiddush is the seifa, that if the nizik ate the meat, the mischaper should bring the lechem. So the mazik still has to pay, right? Has to pay. But the question is, if the nizik ate the meat, maybe we should say, he should be able to say, you, the nizik, should bring the bread. Why should the mazik be the one who brings, again, we're talking about a toda that did damage, which means the mazik is the owner of this carbon. Okay? So if the mazik's the one who brought this carbon, so, and all of a sudden the nizik eats the carbon, so then the question is, why would I have to bring the lechem? He ate it. So the answer is, because the lechem is the chiyuv the baal. It's an obligation on the owner. So therefore the mazik still has to bring the lechem. That's what it's come to tell you. Okay. I did not think that's what I wrote. Nechasim shehein shel b'nei bris. So it has to mean that you did damage, your ox did damage to a b'nei bris. So we'll have to understand this. That if your ox damaged over kachavim's ox, maybe your potter, hakatani will come on. Where do you learn that? So Tana b'had mefarish. So it's true. That is the din. Nechasim hamyuchadim. What exactly are nechasim hamyuchadim? So we're finally getting to a question over here, which is question TA1. Which is going to be 3 answers over here. What is considered to be nechasim hamyuchadim? Okay. So limuti mai. What does that come to exclude? So Rabbi Yehuda limuti ze oimer sharcha hizik, ze oimer sharcha hizik. One person says your ox damaged. Another person says your ox damaged. Says Rashi, she'eni yodeya shor shalmi hazikai. We know that there's damage over here, but we don't know which ox it was. One person says it was this person's ox. One person says it was this person's ox. Shahayu imo shvarim shal nashim harbe. There's a bunch of oxen all over the place, and we just don't know which animal did the damage. So since it's not nechasam yuchadim, you can't really pin it on anyone. So Tani will come on. Hayishnayim roif v'nacher echad. Let's say you have two oxen, which belong to 2 different people, and they're running after someone. Roif v'nacher echad. Zeoimer sharcha hizik. Zeoimer sharcha hizik. And all of a sudden we see a person that's injured. Again, we don't know which person's ox did the damage. Shnei Peturin. We already know this. So what's the chiddush over here? So the answer is you're right. In that situation, we already know this, but Tani b'had mefarish. Again, this is something which is explained again. So this is actually one answer. Zaymer sharcha hizik v'zaymer sharcha hizik. So in that situation, because it's not muchadim, we don't know specifically what it is, your potter. That's answer number 1. B'masnisa tana prat l'nichse hefker. Another possibility is we're dealing with something which is ownerless. We'll see what that means. If my ox gored a hefker ox, so obviously, man tavale, who am I paying, right? It belongs to nobody. So, of course, there's no chiyuv on me. The chiddush is, el de nagach tur de hefker l'tur didan. A hefker animal damaged mine, so no one owns that animal, so leise leise. Why don't you go and just take the shore? as payment. The one that did the damage, take it for yourself. It's hefker. You're right, but shekadam v'zacha b'yacher. Someone else chapped it. Someone else grabbed it before you did. Question 4. Nechasim hamyuchadam li'mute hefker hechidami. So one shot is that the nagach toward the hefker l'tur didan the kadam v'zacha b'yacher. That's one shot. Another pshat of hefker, Ravino Milimuti Nagach V'Yachach Hikdish. Nagach V'Yachach Hifker. So we'll talk about the second case. The animal gored, and then you were mafker it. So you have an animal, and you're like, oh my goodness, it did all this damage. Then you're just mafker it, like you don't know anymore. So in that situation, also in that case, it's hefker. Now, originally, it was, it did belong to someone, but since you're a mafker it, so no longer is it mine. Okay. Now, Tanya Mihach, we learn also in accordance to this opinion, the Brisa, yes, okay, now Rabbi Yehuda, now feel nagav v'achach hikdish, even if it gored and then you're matish it. Nagav v'achach hifker, potter. Even though at the time of the damage you owned it, but since later you were a mafker, you're potter. As we're saying here, apparently. Shnemar, behuad bebalav, the hemus ish v'gaimer. So what does this pasuk tell us? The damage and also going to the court case have to be at the same time, namely, it has to have the same owner. But if before Hamad Badin, you're just mafker it, so then it's not yours, and therefore you're not responsible. Where it says, 1 second, Gemar din loy be'inan, ha'ashor yisakil b'gemar din hu, diksiv, el ema achdei misa v'hamad badin, u'gemar din shavin ke'achad. So therefore, it's not just having ownership on this animal for part of the time, but you have to be the owner from the time it damaged, beginning, and even the Gemar din. But if at any point you're mafker this animal, then the din is, it's considered to be hefker, and therefore you are potter. And that's what it says here. The nagach v'achach hifker ad shdehi misa v'hamad b'din v'gemar din shavin ke'echad. So therefore, that's why you're potter. So let's just see this. There's 3 answers. Nechasim hamyuchadim. So either, as we said, ze oimer sharcha hizik v'zomer sharcha hizik, or hefker, and then it says lamute nagach v'achach hikdish. Oh, hefker. Okay. Sounds pretty much like the second answer, but fine. We can say that's a third answer. It's a little bit difficult. Why that would be a third answer? It's also a hefker. Okay. It's a little bit different. Okay. Weiter. So, chutz mershus hamiyuchedes lamazik. Diarmele tarcha bershusi, my boy. Very logical svara. If you have your animal coming into my property and my animal damages your animal on my property, I can say, listen, you should not have allowed your animal, you can say this to the nizik, to come onto me, the mazik's property, and therefore I'm not responsible. Rishus and nizik v'mazik. So here we're going to have opinions of Rav Chisda and Rav Elazar. Rav Chisda. Ravimi chatzar hashutvin. When it comes to a courtyard that belongs to partners, so the din is chayiv bal shein bal regel. They actually hold that you're going to be chayiv when it comes to the damages of the tooth and the regel. So let's slow down for a second. Let's look at Rashi. So chatzar shutvin chayiv bal hakosav al shein bal regel im ochel behemto el zeh. If the animal of this one eats the fruits of someone else, or dorsal kalev, or stomps on their property, or chayiv, to stay acher krinan bay. It says stay acher, someone else's field. Vo havi kurshus harabim. So this property, which is called a chatzar hashutvin, does not constitute a rishus harabim. The kol shekain al karen v'tol daisav. Certainly, Karen, da'afil Rishus Rabim nami chayiv. The whole patur of Rishus Rabim is only when we're talking about Shein and Regel. But by Karen, you're chayiv even Rishus Rabim. Skipping a few lines. We're talking specifically Shein and Regel. Nami chayiv kamash b'dalav Rishus Rabim damya. So he's saying the Chatzar Shutvin doesn't take upon itself the din of like a Rishus Rabim, even though it's not really owned by one person. But because it's not a Rishus Rabim, so therefore you can be chayiv. Even though typically Shein and Regel are potter, but Rishus Rabim, this doesn't constitute a Rishus Rabim. So let's see this again. Amar Rav Chisda Amar Avimi Chatzar Shutvin Chiyabal Shein Val Regel Hachi Kaimer Chus Rishus Miyuchedes Mazik the potter, excluding when it goes only into the mazik's property. Rishus Nizik v'hamazik and Rishus Nizik v'hamazik kishehizik chavamazik. So therefore, the Seifa is coming to tell you to include Shein v'Regel in Chatzar Shutvin. But not everyone agrees to this. Rabbi Lezer Omer Potter Val Shein v'Regel. No, it's not true. Chutz Rishus HaMiyuchedes Mazik Rishus Nizik v'hamazik nami potter. In this Chatzar Shutvin, so because they're partners, you're also potter. Because he's a chavamazik lasui Karen. That last part is coming to include Karen, because since Karen is chayiv even Rishus Rabim, mashein kin by Regel. So that safe piece is talking about Karen. Okay. Now Hanicha with Shmuel, so you have to hold cup. You have Rav Chisda and Rabbi Lezer argue with regard to Chatzar Shutvin, what the din is. Now Hanicha with Shmuel. Who's Shmuel? Okay. So that's why Rashi is so critical in so many pieces in this daf. Rashi says, "Dear Bereish Pirkin, we don't remember from the first beginning of the parak. Come on, Mav is Shein, v'tana shor l'ragloi, u'mav l'shinu istrucha sui Karen." So Shmuel said when it said shor bor mav maver, not too long ago, about 10 blot ago, it was a machlokes. What's mav? Is he referring to Adam? Is he referring to aspects of the shore? So according to Shmuel, he says Mav is referring to the Shein. And when we say shore in the Mishnah of shor bor Mav Maver, it's also talking about an aspect of the shore, the Regel. Umav the Lashino Istrich. Why do we mention the tooth? And we needed to add. And the Karen. And then the last part is to include the Karen, okay, which is, or maybe it's not included because it's different than Shein and Regel in many aspects. So Tanich Shmuel. So this whole thing is good according to Shmuel, and therefore we need this last line over here to include Karen. Elul Rav Diarmer Tana Shor B'chol Milad Shor. When he says the word shore, it means everything, because Mav is referring to Adam, so shore means everything. Anyway, an ox is damaged, which means the last part, which says cannot be coming to include Karen, because that's already included in the word shore. Tana shor b'chol the shore, chava mazik suimai. So what's that coming to include? What's that coming to include? When it comes to the Arba Shoymim, in which, interestingly enough, we said there was an opinion, not that there was 4 Nezikin, but there's 13, including in that word the Arba Shoymim. So according to this, our Mishnah actually is alluding to those 4 as well. When it comes to someone who is guarding an object, either free or not free, a renter, or someone who is borrowing something, so obviously there's different dinim, Pshia, Oinus, Geneva, Veda, discussed at great length in Parak HaMazik, in Parak HaMafkid, in the third Parak in Bava Metzia. But over here it says as follows. When it comes to these Arba Shoymim, Shazika Behema B'Shusan that an animal did damage in their precious. Tam misham chatzei nezek, kamun misham nezek shalom. That's it. We want to include them. Okay. Nifritza b'layla. Let's say the animal creates some type of breach in the wall, a hole in the wall at night. And how are you really supposed to have known that? Oh, shepartsua listim, or let's say listim caused some damage over there. V'yatasa, and the animal went out. V'hezika potter. In that situation, since it happened at night, and we're not talking about a weak wall, sturdy, this is considered to be an oinus. An oinus, you're potter. So Omer Mar, what is exactly that case? Ilema. Are we talking about the Azke Torah, the Mashal, Torah, the Shoyal? Is it that the ox of the lender damaged the ox of the borrower? Let's say it differently. The lender's ox gored the borrower's ox. That's the mashal. So the lender is the mazik. So lema, let the mashal say, let the lender say, ilu azik ba'alma, if it would have damaged someone else's ox, boy slash at, you would have had to have paid. Hashta de aski laturdi doch be'ino l'shlume. Now that it was my ox, so I have to pay. So in this situation, you're potter. You're responsible to make sure my ox that you borrowed didn't damage other animals, including your own. So interesting. So you can say, listen, why should I be responsible? Because after all, your job as a shoyl was to make sure that it didn't get damaged. Right? You had to watch my ox. So the fact that I have another ox that damaged my ox, I should have to pay. Obviously, right? I shouldn't be chayiv. You should be chayiv. El di aski tor de shoyl tor de mashal. The borrower's ox damaged the lender's ox. So leimule, let the owner say, il itzik me'alma, if it would have damaged from the world, boy slash shlume, kulitori, that to pay him the whole thing. So hashli aski tor di doch, it was yours. Pal gniskaha hu de mishalmasli. So half of the damage I should pay. As the chayiv should pay everything to me. So the answer is like this. What happened was, as we said before, the lender's ox damaged the borrower's ox. So here, why are you chayiv? Shekibul of shmiras gufoi, you only were shomer its body, itself. As we continue Dalet, below kibul of shmiras nizakov, but not damage. Says Rashi, im yaziku esacherim, that if it damages another animal, then I'm not going to be chayiv. So in other words, the shoyl only took upon himself, and I hope I explained it the correct way. I'm beginning to think I may have flipped the cases, that the shoyl only was makabel upon himself to watch this animal to the extent that nothing will happen to it, but it can, if it does other damage, then I'm not going to be responsible. Says Rashi, im yaziku esacherim. So yahachim aseva nifritzabel leil shepartzu listim yatsa v'zika potter. So if it happened at night, a breach in the wall, so your potter habiyom chayev, happened in the day be chayev. Holo kibul of shmiras nizakov. But in that situation, he didn't accept upon himself that he'd be responsible if it did damage. But you just have to add that in. If he was Mekabel Shmiras Niskav upon himself, he's Chayiv, Nivta B'Layl, and Shabbat B'Listim, Yatzav Heziku Potter. So therefore there's a distinction over here between Shmiras Gufo, watching the animal so that it's safe, and making sure that the animal doesn't do damage. Okay. I'm going to stop there. Let's look at question 5, which will hopefully iron this out a little bit better for me. Shor shel shoyel, shehizik as shor the mashal. If you have the ox of the borrower that damages the shor of the mashil, so what's the din? So if the shor shel shoyel damages the shor of the mashal, he's going to be chayiv. However, shor shel mashil the azik is shor to shoyel madin. If the shor of the mashil damages the shor of the shoyel, the borrower, what's the din? So shor shel mashil shehizik is shor to shoyel potter. Hopefully you got that. Adkan.